I'm Julia Fisher. Welcome to the Olive Tree, where you'll hear the stories of both Arab or Palestinian Christians and Jewish believers living in Israel and the West Bank today, to help us understand what God is doing there in these days. When I was in Israel recently recording interviews for this programme, I quite literally bumped into today's guest. I was just leaving a congregation in Tel Aviv called Dugit, and in walked Esther. She is a Jewish lady originally from America. She came to live in Israel in the 1980s and for years lived in Jerusalem, where she ran an English tea shop, which is funny because she isn't English and she doesn't like tea. So here she is to share her story.
I grew up in the United States in a traditional Jewish family, and I always loved as a child the home-centered Jewish traditions. But many times on my way to school, I'd be beaten up by children who called themselves Christian and who blamed me as a Jew for the death of Jesus. They would call me a dirty Christ killer. I didn't even know who he was. But it made me not happy with being Jewish, and I saw nothing that looked appealing in what I saw as Christianity in those days. But I believe it's just a miracle that I always believed in God. It started with a vegetable garden at home that, to me, as a child, was the most magical thing you could ever see. I couldn't imagine that God thought of so many things for us to eat in every color, taste, texture, coming from the ground, hanging on trees, and the fact that we wake up every morning to the miracle of music when the birds wake up singing. And in so many ways, I knew that God was real and that he really loved us, but I never imagined the greatness of his love until one day in 1975 when I came to know the love of Yeshua as the Messiah. And I had a lot to learn. I hadn't grown up in any Christian tradition, so I had not too much to unlearn. So I've only known him pretty much in a Jewish way. But I never would have imagined that he had anything to do with our hope for a Messiah, because we've been hated, killed, and persecuted more in the name of Jesus than any other name, and Israel has never really known his love. But he helped me to understand that the people that did those things to us didn't really know us. They called themselves Christians. They didn't really know him, I mean. They called themselves Christians, but Christianity is a relationship and a friendship with the Lord. It's not a religion. And that those people that really knew him would love his people because he's the God of Israel. Yeshua is the Messiah of Israel. And then he taught me that he fulfilled the festival of Passover when he became the final sacrifice, the fulfillment of the story of Abraham and Isaac. And, you know, we've waited for a Messiah for hundreds of years, and I just cried all night that night when I realized that he kept his promise and that the Messiah had come, not as king like we thought he would, but to reconcile us to God because we had forgiveness of sin, the final korban, the final sacrifice. So I was amazed. Then he helped me to know that we lived in a time when biblical prophecy had been fulfilled with the regathering of the Jewish people in the home promised to us by God, and that it was a miracle that we had even survived as a people all these hundreds of years dispersed across the world, how he kept us to keep our identity, and not just that, our longing to return home to Israel, to Jerusalem, only God could do, because wherever we were, all these hundreds of years, every day we would face towards Jerusalem and pray, Hashanah Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, and God fulfilled it. And then he said to me, so how many years have the Jewish people been waiting to return to their homeland? And I said 2,000. And he said this, it's his sense of humor, which I was very amazed to know he had a sense of humor. Of course, when I understood he was Jewish, I imagined he would. It's part of the secret of our survival. But he said with a New York accent, so what are you doing in America? So in 1976, I returned home to Israel, and I've had the privilege to call Israel home ever since. I've lived in Jerusalem for 35 years, and then very unexpectedly, the Lord opened the door for me to move to Tel Aviv, very unexpectedly. And it was amazing. And since I've been here, only since January, God's opened a lot of doors, one of which I'm able to work. I was volunteered, like he said, by Avi to be a volunteer to work in the coffee shop. And for years in Jerusalem, I had a ministry called the English Tea Room, which was funny because I'm American and don't like tea, like you said. But it was a real outreach. And for any one of the people that came to know the Lord, it was worth the battles, because it was a battle. I have a testimony that fills a 500-page book, and that's nothing, that's only covers 10 years. The book's available as a gift because it comes with God's love, and you can't sell that. But anyway, I could tell adventures for the next 100 years, but I know you're time limited. I just want to say that we're feeling very much God's heart for the salvation of Israel right now, that it's really very close to his heart, that something's going to happen, that this nation at last is going to recognize who Mashiach really is. Just like the story of Joseph, when Joseph looked like an Egyptian to his brothers, they would never imagine that he was their brother. Just like Yeshua, who looks like our main persecutor, Holocaust, crusades, the whole works, and yet he is who he is. Just like Joseph said, but I am your brother. There's going to be a day soon when he's going to say, I am your Messiah and King. And I do believe that any way in these days that we reach out in his love to other people, for every person that would hear this broadcast, it's very critical, because we don't have the luxury of time anymore. There's a world out there without hope. And so my prayer is that all of us, until the day when the trumpets blow and the King of Israel comes home, that we can be vessels of his love to reach out to a world that needs him now more than ever.
Esther, you say that you moved to Israel from the States over 30 years ago, probably nearer 40 years now. Therefore, you have seen an awful lot happen. We ask the question in this program, what is God doing in Israel? You believe time is short. Things, therefore, are speeding up. You've seen a lot happen.
Yes. Well, God made a promise to us when we returned home to Israel that once we were here, we would not leave again, and that no weapon formed against us would prosper, and that he is the guardian of Israel. There have been miracles without end from 1948 until now of God's protection. Amazing, amazing things, like 1948, when we didn't have anything, and we won that war when our enemies crossed the borders to try to destroy us. The story of the Entebbe rescue, or the amazing story of the bombing of the Iraqi nuclear reactor, was like reading Bible headlines of years ago. They were done perfectly, flawlessly, amazingly, impossible except for God's hand. 39 Scud missiles fell, primarily in Tel Aviv. They didn't want the world, our enemies, to know that. It's a very highly populated city. Only God could let those missiles land, that not a single person died as a direct result of the missiles, Scud missiles. Excuse me, one person died of a heart attack, and that's amazing. And when he said to the North, to the communist nations, give up. I used to travel for 5 years, every year during the high holy days, to the former Soviet Union to reach out to the Jewish people, and even to let them know that God was going to have them come home. And it seems so impossible, but the Bible said, I will say to the North, give up. And they would say to me, when will he do it? And I'd say, I don't know. And they'd say, how will he do it? And I'd say, I don't know, but he will. And when it was his timing, as you know, because it's part of history, they fell like dominoes. For Israel's salvation, there are many, many, many scriptures in the Bible, Old and New Covenants, talking about the salvation of Israel. Again, I don't know how he'll do it. The Bible says, before they ask, I will answer them. But when it's close, it's very close. So it's going to be very exciting. And I've seen, when I came to Israel, there were about 40 believers in the whole country. Now there's at least 20 to 30,000. So God's already doing something.
Esther, I've met you literally as you've just come in the door to Dugit. You've come to work in the coffee shop,
Yes.
the outreach shop. So you don't know who's going to walk in this afternoon. You don't know who you're going to be talking to. How do you go about it?
Well, it's like it was in the restaurant. Every day was different. But what I do is I absolutely trust God's love for people, and He really gives the wisdom. I'm a bit of a hermit at heart. This is nothing that I would want to do naturally. When the Lord worked out the tea room ministry, He took everything I hate in life and made it into one job and gave the grace and the joy to do it. So I trust His love for people, and the main purpose is outreach, because He's our Messiah and they need to know it. So it's a bit of an adventure, and I'm happy to be part of this ministry. I've known Avi and Chaya for many, many years already.
And so somebody comes in. Do you go up and talk to them? Do you initiate the conversation?
Yeah, I just welcome them. I mean, each time's different and each person's different, but my job, I only started there a few weeks ago, but to be welcoming and in Him, and the minute anyone asks what it's about, or even if they don't, we explain it. And I sure initiate. It's like welcoming them into your home.
Esther, a lady I met in Tel Aviv, sharing her life's journey. And you're listening to The Olive Tree with me, Julia Fisher. The Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund is a Christian charity based in the UK that supports the needs of both Jewish believers and Arab Christians living in Israel and the wider Middle East. If you would like to know more about our work and receive our free bi-monthly newsletter, please either visit our website olivetreefund.org or write to me, Julia Fisher, at the Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund, PO Box 850, Horsham, RH12 9GA in the UK. Thank you for your company today. Do join me at the same time next week for another story from the Olive Tree. Until then, goodbye.